Good morning, all. I am Vijay Kumar K V, Assistant Professor of English, Government Prasha College, Bapanagar, Shimaga. I would like to brief you about the features of metaphysical poetry. Metaphysical poetry is another remarkable literary production of neoclassical literature. A group of 17th century poets write a unique style which stands apart from the literary traditions of the age. The 16th century was smooth and filled with sweet tones. In contrary to the new style is energetic, uneven, and rigorous. This style of writing is identified later as metaphysical writing, where the poems are highly intellectualized and strange imageries are used to convey the complicated thoughts. For the first time, John Dryden applied the term metaphysics while criticizing John Donne, the pioneer of metaphysical school of poetry, has affects the metaphysics in his amorous verses. In his a discourse concerning the origin and progress of satire. Later, Samuel Johnson, in his book Lives of English Poets, consolidated the argument and applied to the group of poets. The term metaphysical denotes the relationship between the physical world and human consciousness. The word metaphysical derives from the Greek word meta and physics, which means beyond physical. The metaphysical poets try to give concrete form of abstract ideas through unusual images and comparisons. Therefore, T.S. Eliot, in his essay The Metaphysical Poets, expresses that their work fuses reason with passion. It shows a unification of thoughts and feelings which later became separated into dissociation of sensibility. Features of metaphysical poetry. Metaphysical poetry expresses the departure from the Elizabeth style of writing and ideas. The Elizabethan ideas focused much on conventional themes. They wrote smooth kind of poems. They used sophisticated language and based their poems on the model of Latin and Greek poems. They gave much importance to the meter and rhythm, sometimes adopted complicated rhyme schemes in their poems. They exaggerated their ideas which are far from the reality. Hence, the metaphysical poets rejected the conventional idealistic notions of Elizabethans, which are different to real experiences. Metaphysics gave prominence to the experiences happening at present than the ideal one. Metaphysical writers intentionally brought some changes in their writing to convey their views of society. Metaphysical poems usually begins in dramatic manner and direct tone of speech. The beginning of the poem is direct and abrupt. For example, in the poem, the conversation beginning is given a dramatic start. For God's sake, hold your tongue and let me allow. Metaphysical poets used colloquial speeches in contrary to sophisticated diction of the Elizabethans. The colloquial language is useful in creating the expected style of poems. The sweet and harmony of the poem of Elizabethan is replaced by prosaic, rough, and unpoetic words. Therefore, their poems are coarse and irregular. Thirdly, metaphysical poems are argumentative and logical in style. They adopted argumentative style to meet the end. The arguments are brief and closely woven. In all the poems, the reader will be held in one side and the line of argument is on another side. Fourth one, metaphysical poets gave much importance to the content and meaning than the technique. As there was dramatic approach to the poem, abrupt phrases, question, and dramatic use of punctuations. Metaphysical poets used conceits in their poems to present their logical arguments. They used fantastic comparisons to create desired images. For example, the poem A Valediction Forbidding Morning. Sixth one, use of wit is another characteristic of metaphysical poetry. They draw images from various fields like nature, art, medicine, cosmology, discoveries, ancient myths, history, law, and science. Metaphysical poets blended passion with thought. They intellectually analyzed the emotions at present in the poem. For example, a valediction forbidden mourning. The poet says that lovers need not mourn on their parting. So let us melt and make no noise. Neither tear, floods, nor sigh tempest move. It were profanation of our joys to tell the lady of love. Metaphysical poets. Metaphysical poets of 17th century have been written poems in a unique style. A group of writers who are known to each other or read each other's work has written in a same style. The prominent writers of this school are Jordan, George Herbert, Henry Vaughan, Andrew Marvell, Abraham Cowley. Jordan is regarded as the founder of metaphysical school of poetry. He was born to a Catholic family in London. Though he studied in two prominent universities, he could not get his certificate as he followed the Catholicism in Protestant London. Then he changed his faith to Anglican Church. By comparing both the religious faith and its repercussions made him skeptic towards religion. He began writing poems, essays, and other for the patrons he has produced. Many poems of author amorous, religious, all his poems are collected in anniversaries, holy sonnets, and songs and sonnets. Donne has written his poems in colloquial language. He uses wit, conceit, and far-fetched metaphors in presenting his logical arguments in the poems. He expresses his discontent about the moral corruption of human beings through his poems. His satires present the simple truths of life in grand narratives. The amorous poems are filled with wit and conceit. They are emotional and sensuous with reasoning. He fetches images from various fields of knowledge like zoology, geography, astronomy, and so on to convey the emotions of the lovers. The religious poems, which are collected in holy sonnets, are in the form of sonnet, especially in Petrarchan style. They express the dilemmas of the human beings between the spirituality and materialistic life. They also talk about the judgment day and man's unpreparedness for it. Some of his popular poems are The Good Morrow, The Canalization, A Valediction Forbidding Morning, etc. Next metaphysical poet is George Herbert. George Herbert is well known as the saint of metaphysical school. He served as a clergyman in the Church of England. He was greatly devoted poet of his times. All his poems were published under the title The Temple. His poems are small lyrics with deeply religious in nature. They are in simple, plain language filled with complex metaphors. He presents the conflict between the God and the human beings. He finds the connections between the church in its physical form and the soul in its spiritual form. Many of his poems addresses this inner temple than the external one. Such devotion is also expressed in his poem architectural style of the churches. All his poems are addressed to the God directly, not to the reader. They are in conventional tone with touch of intimacy. Herbert's poems are popular as old poems in this sense. They convey complete sense to the reader. He has written more than 100 poems with different metrical forms. His metrical forms of a poem are not repeated once. Some of his popular poems are The Collar, The Pulley, Death, etc. Henry Vaughan, 1622 to 1695. Henry Vaughan was an Anglo-Welsh poet, was a doctor and the royalist. He is well known for his religious metaphysical poems. He has also written amorous poems, but his religious poems are widely regarded. He is influenced greatly by Herbert's collection of poems, The Temple. He borrows themes, titles, metrical forms, and phrases from the temple, but he did not merely copy them, but owned them. One can trace the metaphysical qualities of all poets in his poems like Donne's wit. His belief towards God is sacred and secular. He finds God not only in religious practices or in the church, but also in the secular things like nature. He finds God's will in the activities of the nature. He focuses on the unfaithfulness of man towards God in his poems. Some of his well known poems are The Retreat, The Waterfall, The World, and The Drawing, etc. Next metaphysical poet is Andrew Marvell, 1621 to 1678. Andrew Marvell was a well-known, widely read as a metaphysical poet of 17th century. His political qualities are overshadowed by his political reputation. He served with monarchy in different capacities. His collection of poems includes political verse, satires, commentary, and amorous poems. He combines both metaphysical wit and classical style of writing. Morality, social upheaval, spirituality are popular themes of his poems. Some of his popular poems are To His Coy Mistress, On a Drop of Dew, The Garden. Richard Prasha, 1612 to 1614. Richard Prasha is a metaphysical poet known for his religious poems of stylistic ornamentation. He is influenced by the Italian and Spanish mysticism. He uses conceits to draw differences between the physical beauty of nature and the spiritual significance of it. He has written poems in Latin, Greek, and English. All his poems are collected in the volumes named Steps to the Temple, Delight of the Muses. Session summary. What is metaphysical poetry? What are the characteristic features of metaphysical poetry is discussed along with the examples of poets and poems. Dear students, for further reference, you can refer a critical history of English literature, David H's, a short history of English literature, Pramod K. Nair, a glossary of literary terms, M.H. Abrahams, an outline history of English literature, Hudson. Thank you.